Good morning, Highlands Church family. This week on Sunday morning, I'm going to be talking about stewardship. As we lead up to that, Luke and I are going to be sharing some truths from God's Word that reflect not just the call to faithfulness in this area, but God's graciousness in leading us to be faithful stewards, because God understands this is the most difficult area of discipleship that most of us ever face.
That's right. And listen to the words of Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Command those who are rich in the things of this life not to be proud, but to place their hope not in uncertain things such as riches, but in God, who generously gives everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. In this way, they will store up for themselves a treasure which will be a solid foundation for the future. And then they will be able to win the life, which is a true life. So part of what Paul is telling us here is he's explaining what Jesus was talking about when Jesus said, store up for yourself treasures in heaven. So what kind of treasures was Jesus and Paul talking about?
Well, it's interesting because it sounds mythical and mysterious, but I believe it's something very, very practical. When Paul and Jesus talk about treasures in heaven, they're talking about lives that are touched, lives that are changed, lives that are rescued, lives that are saved because of our faithfulness and how God has used that. So the treasure in heaven are going to be the people that we meet as a result of who are there because of our generosity. I remember a number of years back, I was down at the beach with my family for a vacation, and I went into a surf shop, which was common for me to do. I used to surf, but I had snapped my surfboard sometime earlier and just couldn't afford to replace it. I still like to go into surf shops and dream, and so I went into this surf shop, and there was the perfect board. Fell in love with it as soon as I looked at it, but I knew I simply did not have the money to purchase it. I got a call that week at the beach that a woman in the congregation had died. I had to leave the vacation to go back and do the funeral. Her brother, who was very, very wealthy, understood that I'd given up part of my vacation. And as I was leaving the gravesite, he walked up to me and shook hands. And as he did, I could tell that there was money in his hand. I didn't look at it at the moment because I didn't want to be too presumptuous. But when I got back into the car, he had given me several $100 bills. In my hand, I had the money to purchase that surfboard. I could not wait to get back to the beach. I could feel my feet on that board already. I mean, you could cue the music at that point. But I had this uneasy feeling.
It's a good song. Did you write it?
I did. And I had this uneasy feeling on the way back that something just didn't set right with my spirit. It hadn't been too long before then that I had learned about a mission in Armenia called Project Agape. And this mission, part of what it did is it established an orphanage in a disputed territory for orphans of people that had been killed in the conflict in that part of the world. And it suddenly became clear before I ever got back to that surf shop that I was supposed to give that money to support that mission. When I did that, Luke, I had no idea that 2 years later, I would be in Armenia. 2 years later, I would be at that very orphanage. 2 years later, I would be holding the children that I had sent that money to support. And I will tell you, at that moment, I wouldn't have traded that experience for 100 surfboards. I think it's going to be a bit like that in heaven. When we get there, we're going to meet people and they're going to say, I heard the gospel because you were faithful and you gave. My life was rescued because out of mercy you came to me when I was in need. That's going to be the treasure. And we're going to get to enjoy that for all eternity.
Well, that's a great story. And I hope you guys can come this Sunday to hear more about how we can trust God and how we can store up treasures in heaven.